So thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the modernization of cemetery and funeral services organizations using NetSuite. Specifically, we're going to be talking through joint Bridgepoint and NetSuite customer Catholic funeral and cemetery services and how they have been able to leverage the NetSuite system and Bridgepoint's partnership to improve their business operations. So the majority of time today will be spent talking with Eric Downs, who's the NetSuite practice leader at Bridgepoint, and Stephanie Sloane, the director of analytics at CFCS. We will save some time for questions at the end. So as you can see, all of you are muted, but please leverage that chat box. We will have a few minutes that we can spend with answering your questions that you may have that pop up during the event. So I'll keep an eye on that throughout the event, but just a reminder, please leverage that chat box throughout the event. My name's Hayley Null. I work at NetSuite and I manage our co-marketing with our alliance partners like Bridgepoint, as well as our SDN partners, and I will be moderating today's event. As I mentioned, I am joined by Eric Downs and Stephanie Sloane. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to Eric to do a quick intro on himself, his background in the company, and then we'll do the same with Stephanie.
Great. Thanks, Hayley. So my name is Eric Downs. I'm a NetSuite practice director at Bridgepoint. Bridgepoint Consulting is a kind of management consulting firm and a full service NetSuite alliance partner. We really help our companies leverage and implement NetSuite and also do integration work to support, other applications. We really help to modernize the technology and processes that people go through. I've been working with NetSuite specifically for about 14 years, ERPs in general across many different industries for about 20 years now. And really looking forward to this conversation today and share what we're able to accomplish with CFCS and specifically with Stephanie and her team. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful. So just a little bit about myself. I've, as Hayley mentioned, worked for Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services and am our director of analytics. I've been with the organization for just over a decade, amazingly already. And effectively what our company does is we work within the Catholic Church space, specifically with the cemetery and funeral ministries across the country. We've worked with about 30 dioceses in our life and try and bring them professionalized management services. And a big component of that has been looking at systems and how to get data. And so this was a wonderful opportunity working with Eric's team and the NetSuite product. For us, I think the buzzword of today's webinar is going to be modernize, but to modernize our operations so we could get access to data, also have homogeneous platforms one day in the future. So we're all working off the same pieces. So very excited to have this discussion and chat a little bit about our experience, because I certainly know for folks in the cemetery and funeral industry, software tends to be one of the biggest items that bogs us down and where we get access to our data. So hopefully this will be an interesting conversation for everyone who's joined us today.
Perfect. Thanks, Stephanie. And we're definitely looking forward to your insights related to your specific industry. So jumping right in for the bulk of today's conversation, we're going to be discussing CFCS's ERP journey. Can you talk through the key business drivers that you evaluated when you were going through your system transformation?
Certainly. I think the number one challenge for us as an organization, again, is that we work with dioceses and their cemetery and funeral systems across the country, which means we inherited a whole host of legacy systems. Some of you on this call may even remember the programming COBOL. We've worked with COBOL systems that produce only green bar paper, DOS systems, Windows, et cetera. So we've seen the gamut of software that's out there. And so I think our number one business decision was, what is the platform we as an organization want to invest in and bring to the Catholic Church as the best practice, and allow ourselves to homogenize systems. The other piece of that, again, is exactly what I just talked about, was because we had inherited so many legacy softwares, we were pretty reticent to go down the route of kind of proprietary industry software that doesn't grow with the times. And instead, you're living on a legacy platform. And yes, we're in 2021 now, but what does that look like in 2031, especially as the technology curve continues to get quicker and quicker and quicker? So knowing that NetSuite had a SaaS product where we get to leverage all of the improvements that Fortune 100 companies are doing, as well as the dedicated team at NetSuite. So we'll get those incremental improvements and see our platform continue to stay relevant was a critical component of this versus getting stuck in a historic system.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Stephanie, too. I know when we initially first started chatting, just the ability to have resources that support those kind of industry-specific solutions. As time goes by, those individuals tend to kind of fade off into the distance, and that support, ongoing support, becomes a challenge for a lot of these organizations. And that's one thing that we kind of heard throughout our conversations.
And that leads me really nicely into our next question. So as you touched on, Stephanie, you guys were relying on legacy outdated systems and you wanted something that was more modern. But I know, as we've talked about before, there are a lot of very unique and complex needs for your specific industry. Can you talk about how your evaluation process looked and how you navigated addressing the nuances that the cemetery and funeral services industry needs as they're looking at new softwares?
Definitely. And I think one of our largest drivers in this process was to try and think of ourselves as a normal business. And again, I think because of the legacy systems that so many cemeteries and funeral homes operate off of, we end up with kind of interesting accounting, inventory processes, et cetera, because the software is driving you into those protocols because it's what it can facilitate, it's how it's built. So we really want to do some blue sky thinking of what is the cleanest way to do our accounting, to do our record keeping. And I know that was one of the biggest challenges we gave to Eric and his team at Bridgepoint of, can you help us think of some analogs in our space, whether it's hospitals, hotels, et cetera, as we're thinking of these components, and let's get into that 21st century best practices. Because we know a lot of the ways we did things weren't necessarily a best practice from a technology data standpoint. So certainly that was kind of the largest component of this in our process. As I think of the components that were probably challenging for Eric and his team and just a little unique to our space, we obviously have a slightly different inventory process. Because we don't just deliver a product and it goes to the consumer and they now have it. We want to keep a tail on that, which is, again, understanding who's where, what the genealogical history is. So there ends up being kind of a legacy component to our inventory. And fortunately, NetSuite's custom records allowed us to quickly solve that and have a regular inventory process, but also have that convert into a record that allows us to know where everyone is. And again, they're critical information. And then I think the second component for us is we offer interest-free financing on our cemetery and funeral services. And so as we were thinking through how we were going to build those terms, create installments, invoice, and the like, we found the analog again of thinking through kind of the car sales process. And the idea of having kind of a finance manager that handles your installments. And so we created those custom records to store that relationship with the customer and also give us flexibility as the Catholic Church, because oftentimes we're not going to collections. We want to work with our families and adjust their terms. And again, knowing that there's different economic realities. So having that flexibility so that we could work with our families and make sure we have the right relationship with them.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Definitely when Stephanie, you and your team kind of brought these challenges to the forefront with us, our approach is always to kind of apply leading practices that exist within NetSuite as much as we possibly can. And with the advances, obviously, of NetSuite year over year, we were able to actually leverage some of the relatively new tools that they had, specifically as it pertains to, the inventory, which we call inventory, which is in reality property, which isn't really applicable for NetSuite's inventory module. But as Stephanie articulated, the ability to leverage and extend the platform to support these business processes and really provide a transformational, visibility into, what is going on within the organization and where, the genealogy comes into play, really was fairly straightforward. And I call it an advanced configuration, as well as to your point, that management of those, financial arrangements, right? And really kind of decoupling that from maybe an order per se, and really allowing somebody that great visibility and true automation around, fulfilling those payment obligations throughout the course of the life cycle of the financial contract. So really, leveraged as much as we possibly could with those leading practices, but extended where we needed to.
That sounds great. I know the flexibility in those leading practices that we've touched on a few times are kind of common themes that I see across customers that end up selecting NetSuite. So Stephanie, moving on to the next question, can you talk a little bit more? I know your business was historically very paper-based before. What improvements have you seen since moving to this very digital transformation with NetSuite and with Bridgepoint?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And for those of you who are in cemeteries, you're certainly used to having the vault and binders and binders and binders of historical records. I think the thing coming into this industry that scared me the most was when you look at those paper records holding really all of this history and really important family connections that we've been entrusted to safekeep. And again, they're existing in paper, they're existing in physical places, whether it's a fire, a flood, etc. We've seen all of those at our locations and we've lost critical records. So having a secure system where we can save that information, again, leverage the data security that NetSuite has in place. So again, we don't have to worry about that because we're certainly not experts in creating secure environments. So knowing that our family's information is somewhere safe certainly was a really, really critical component for us. And then just getting into kind of our processes, I think it was a little bit startling when we realized how many systems we had built around our systems. So whether they're Excel forms or tick sheets, getting really fancy there, that previously existed just because it was hard to extract information. So we set up redundancies. So I think from an administrative perspective for both our sales folks, our admin team, our managers, we stripped a lot of just redundancy out of the process. Now it's a single entry and we can create the reports we need out of that. And then I think another process I would highlight is our cash reconciliation. Again, knowing that we had a subledger in place in the Diocese of Oakland that we were trying to tie to our GL, but we constantly just have this mess at the end of the month of a cash rec where we actually had all of our managers, accountants get in a room together and solve this, to now where we're actually doing daily cash recs. So at month end, you go look for one or two outlying transactions and something odd that happened. So I would say, I mean, conservatively, we probably save 40 hours a month of man hours just with our new cash rec process. And as we go through that, again, we just have so many more controls built in daily where we're catching items that got improperly entered. We're resolving issues as they pop up. So our month end no longer is this, wait sprint. It's a much more cohesive process and leads us to be able to give better reports throughout the month and look at really live data effectively. Which for us was a kind of a groundbreaking concept, amazingly, in 2021.
Great comments, Stephanie. So yeah, some of the interesting challenges with a number of different industries that I work with, hearing about the catalogs of files that existed within an organization was somewhat daunting, but also provided us really an opportunity for some transformation to really see some significant improvements. And it really broke down in a couple of different areas, really just down to having a single source of truth in a single application. These other industry specific solutions that are out there handle a portion of your organization's operations, but not all. So a lot of them don't necessarily tie to your GL, or there's a batch process that exists there. So really centralizing everything into a single application immediately transforms the organization to know where the source of truth is and be able to drill into those specific details. And then getting into the kind of minutia of some of the things. I know at one stage of the project, we were, everybody was so used to sticky notes and posting things on files that existed in the office. And then as the pandemic hit, really the ability to collaborate within an environment. And we added on a little suite bundle that NetSuite has, which allowed sticky notes. And so we could post sticky notes where people had questions about specific contracts and be able to collaborate back and forth within the organization and resolve those families' issues much quicker than they would have ever been able to do for sending files or sending an email. It was all there and really provided a detailed history of what transpired throughout the course of that contract or that arrangement that a family may have made. So we're still, I think, working towards, the true digitalization of all those contracts, but those are steps that we're going to make over the course of the next couple of years to really make that a true digital environment for the organization and have a true detailed history of all the family records. So.
Yeah, and Eric, I would love to just hit on what you just said there, because I do think this has been so critical for us as an organization, is having the records of what's transpired and the interaction amongst our team, especially during the pandemic where we had folks going out or leaving the organization just at a higher rate because of what was going on externally. And suddenly we had digital records that allowed us to pick up cases, sticky notes, and understand what people were working on, where they were in the progress, and really the disruption that an individual leaving an organization, especially in some of our smaller locations, historically would have caused us. And unfortunately, dropped interactions with families. We really saw that cut dramatically where we had those records. We knew what we were working on, who to reach out to. So that's been a really critical component of our success through the pandemic, certainly.
Thanks, Stephanie. I know we talked about a few key benefits that you guys have seen, namely employee productivity, being able to close the books faster, just better data overall. You just touched on something that I want to dive into a little bit more. This has not only helped your organization, but obviously has your customers have seen an improvement too in your customer service levels and how you're interacting with them. Can you talk a little bit more about how your customers have benefited from this project transformation?
Yeah, I'm always a little embarrassed to say what our old relationship at times was, but it was a lot of, we're going to need to call you back tomorrow because I need to go pull paper files and have conversations with 3 folks. So having the opportunity to have that information right at your fingertips and train our whole team so everyone could answer those questions really got us out of the specialization that had to happen with legacy systems where one member of our team really knew how to get into the system and we were waiting for that individual to come back from vacation to solve this, or for her to be available off of a different customer she was chatting with. So having kind of universal access has allowed us to really respond more quickly. Also, just having a 21st century software system. One of the pieces we're doing right now is we're introducing a customer accounts website. So similar to any Comcast insurance company where you can log on, pay your bill, manage your account. For the first time in our history, we're going to have that access so our families can go onto a website and manage their account and not have to call us. Run a credit card immediately, run an ACH, et cetera. So I think that's going to be a tremendous win for the organization and for our families. And again, that's been our main goal, is to just have more visibility, more comfort, and try and be as responsive as possible to our families. And that's, fortunately, our NetSuite configuration is really improving those goals and allowing us to be a better customer service that's family focused, certainly.
Yeah, and I'd add to that as having, been in the weeds with these guys during the kind of post go live support and watching how the ability, or giving the families the ability to easily pay with a credit card, was so transformational. It went from, we converted from kind of multiple systems where they were trying to support, reoccurring credit card charges, but being able to kind of move that data in and watching the adoption of families take that option for credit card payments, and being able for the organization to automate that reoccurring charges throughout the system, have complete transparency and visibility to not only within, but also to their families. Saw it grow, I think, 10, 20-fold in the first couple of months. It was just making that convenience available to families was just a huge transformation. And then the self-service aspect, again, leveraging, NetSuite's native, application, Suite Commerce, to really be able to kind of extend the application and give that flexibility for families to be able to do self-service. Huge transformation. So really great to see those things deployed and see those family and CFCS really adopt it.
That's great. And like I mentioned, when I'm speaking with a lot of our NetSuite customers, I think the benefits that the ultimate end user or end customer will see is not something necessarily that is kind of forefront and in the center of your evaluation, but is definitely kind of an unidentified benefit that you guys do ultimately end up seeing when you do go through this transformation and this technology modernization project. So I know we're coming up to the bottom of the hour. I do have one more question, Stephanie, for you and Eric, but just a reminder for our audience, please submit any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll make sure to leave some time for that in our last couple of minutes. Final interview question for you, Stephanie. What's next for CFCS, either with NetSuite or overall for the organization? Anything you want to tell us there?
Yeah, so I think for NetSuite, I'm so excited for where we're going with this, because basically the last year we spent with Eric and his team was really focused on making our transactions work, having a stable GL, having cohesive records. And yes, we've done some of the fun stuff, as I like to say it, like the customer portal. But I think just having the NetSuite platform be so open is going to give us so many opportunities. And I know we're kind of already internally having fights over where we want to go next, just because there's so much opportunity in there for us to modernize our business practices. So a basic thing is when we do intake of loved ones, similar to hospitals, do we want to have RFID bracelets so we know throughout the whole process and track those individuals within our system? There's also the ability for mapping components within our inventory so we can help families get to their loved ones quicker. And then probably most critically, which I know we're going down the path right now on, is building a more robust point of sale experience. So our family service advisors, aka our sales folks, can walk families through an ordered sales process that's very transparent, informational, and making sure they hit all of the critical components, because there really are so many decisions within this process. We want to simplify that as much as possible. So it's all really exciting. And I know I'm on calls monthly with our different organizations, basically asking when can NetSuite come to us next, and then also talking within our functional groups of, hey, can you guys help us solve this challenge? And the answer is always yes, with the NetSuite platform, which is so nice. And Eric and his team's help on Bridgepoint. So again, very exciting for us to be on the NetSuite platform, and I'm really excited to see where we can take this business next.
Yep, and we're excited to go along with that journey and really help you guys leverage it to its fullest capacity, right, or capabilities. So really excited to see where CFCS wants to go next, and if there's a spot where we can help, we love to help and really see the transformation get put in place.
Definitely. Thanks both of you for your insights. This was very helpful, and I'm sure our audience members took a lot of great insights away. As I mentioned, feel free to post any questions in the chat. I do have a couple of questions that I want to cover in our last couple of minutes, but we'll answer as many as we can. I know we've talked through this entire presentation around Bridgepoint's role in the process of helping CFCS adopt NetSuite and implement it. Stephanie, can you talk a little bit more about how you were able to lean on Bridgepoint throughout the process?
Sure. I think the number one thing for us was realizing we're not technology experts. What we're experts in is the cemetery and funeral space. So having a partner that is in the technology space, but also speaks human, is not something you always find. So Eric and his team were phenomenal partners where we just walk through a process map and explain what we're doing now. Most of the time we had ideal states of where we'd like to go as well. And then his team was able to transform that into demonstrations within NetSuite so we could tangibly see, okay, here's how this would work. This makes sense. Because it is a new platform. There's a new lexicon that comes with working with a new system. So having a partner that speaks that language and can easily translate it to us, I think was probably the most critical part of that journey. And then also just knowing throughout the Bridgepoint practice, I know, Eric, you leveraged a couple of your different partners who had worked in different industries to bring us best practices or leading practices, was really helpful and comforting for us as we were going through this process. Because I do think that's kind of the scary thing when you're working with a platform is, am I making the right decisions? And so having a partner that can hold your hand, also say, yep, this large company does this, or this industry does this, you're on the right track, I think was very reassuring for us as we went through the process. And at the same time, there are some things I think we wanted to do early in the process, where they put up their hands and said, do you want to think about this maybe a little differently? Hey, I've built a demo. Does this work better than what you're thinking? And generally the answer was yes. So they were phenomenal partners for us in that respect, certainly.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. Really appreciate those kind of words. And it definitely helped, obviously, with Stephanie and her team to have that vision, really to have that, what do we want this to look like? And for us to obviously poke holes in it a little bit, but also kind of help adopt that vision into leading practices within NetSuite, right? How can we leverage the platform based on what they really want to accomplish and really have, specific and great decision-making, authorities to kind of get through that process and make for a successful go live. So it was great, exciting, and probably, well, you guys are one of my favorite clients. I really have enjoyed the dialogue and really the collaboration that we work together on.
Mutually felt in terms of you being our favorite partner.
That sounds great. I know we only have a minute left. So Stephanie, one last question for you. I love to ask this of our customers in these type of conversations. Knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently that you want to share with our audience?
Oh, I would have done this 10 years ago. I think that was my one takeaway once we got on here was, oh my gosh, life is so much better. But I think in all seriousness, probably some of the pre-work we put into this, it was a challenge for us figuring out how much and whom within the organization we wanted to involve. And we ended up having a pretty small implementation group that we tested things against. So I probably would have been just a little bit more robust and picked a couple more leading experts out of that. We certainly had them beat us up in our demo rollouts and had a pretty good support group. But just integrating a couple more of those subject matter experts earlier in our process, I think could have been helpful. But really our decision was speed. So we didn't want to get this bogged down in too much of a groupthink environment. So we went for a more nimble rollout. But that's probably the two things: do it faster and have a little bit larger test group earlier in the process.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. I know we're a minute over, so want to extend thanks to Eric and Stephanie again for your time today. Like I mentioned, this was very valuable for me, and I'm sure our audience felt the same way. As you all saw, this is being recorded, so we will send out the recording after the event. So feel free to take a look, send it on to your colleagues, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful day.
Everybody.